Thank you, Bob. It's fun to come to one of the science cafes. I've appreciated going to a few of them already. I think there's not too many people right now. It might be kind of fun just to kind of go around the room and just kind of figure out who's in the room and some of the interests you have. And if you have a strong interest in computer games, kind of say maybe what some of your favorite games are, or if you're into some kind of art, because one of the things we'll be talking about is visualization in our software. I'd be interested in what kind of some people are doing with maybe computer games or art in the audience. Do you want to start?
Sure. My name is Marion Miller, and I favorite computer games.
Underground layers in GIS, that would be?
Most of my work like that was in the coal mining industry, so we have a single layer rather than multiple layers.
I see, cool. All right, thank you.
In some cases we have multiple layers, but usually just single layers.
Okay, thank you. Hi.
Hi, I'm Shannon. I'm a photographer, and I don't really play video games, but when I was a kid, I loved Carmen Sandiego and Oregon Trail.
Great. Very nice ones. And behind the camera.
Oh, hi. I'm Lauren Peppersack.
Hi, everyone. The man on the ladder is Sean Barr. He's working here at Redfish for the last 2 years. Sean, do you have a favorite video game? That's actually an understatement. You go into his office and he's got like 6 simultaneous poker games going as he's betting them. I can only play one at a time, but he's pretty proficient. So thank you again for letting us have this opportunity. Break this talk into a few parts. But the introduction will be kind of Santa Fe science and Santa Fe type of thinking. How many of you have heard of complex systems or complexity? Some of you have gone through some classes perhaps in it. So don't want to make it mystical or intimidating. It's actually a very simple concept. So we'll show some examples. Do a little bit of, as Bob said, an introduction to Santa Fe complex. Show some example projects in computer gaming and simulation and visualization. So we're kind of crossing the lines between the two and kind of mixing these, where a computer game and a simulation is kind of a pendulum. As you get into more interactivity, we think you're in the game world. Simulation might be something that's kind of running off by itself. And then something that kind of our niche is how do we, as Tom was mentioning, take large amounts of data, which is growing in every industry and every scientific discipline now, and how do you not only just represent it, but think about how to represent it. What are the right metaphors given this data set? How can you present it in an interesting way back to the people that actually live with that data every day and have to make decisions on it, or come up with new ideas in their research? So I'll show some example projects, and then what we're kind of setting up here, and what Sean was climbing up the ladder is we're moving toward. We don't like being stuck behind the computers all day. When we do simulations, and we have what we call stakeholders come into a simulation, people that are very interested about a problem, having to huddle around a screen or a projector with a mouse and keyboard, like right now I'm in control of this screen. So, unless someone kind of tackles me, you can be in control of it. But where we like to go is getting people around a table and interacting with a simulation, or in a live room where the information is out on the walls or on the floor and not necessarily just up on screens. So that's what we call about throw away the computers, and we'll show a little bit of that. So a little bit of background history of Santa Fe Institute and the science. Starting in the 50s, simulation grew up at Los Alamos Labs looking at weapons development. In around 84, a few researchers came out of the Center for Nonlinear Studies, Nonlinear Dynamic Studies, the Center for NLDS. Anyway, they came out of a group at Los Alamos and formed the Santa Fe Institute, thinking there's a lot of problems out there beyond weapons development that have a need for looking at these types of systems where you have a lot of interacting components, which we'll talk about in a second here. So this was in the mid-'80s. Zooming forward in the mid-'90s or 2000, Santa Fe Institute grows up, and a bunch of little companies have grown up around Santa Fe. Some of these died in the .com. This BIOS group was, a lot of us were a part of that, so there's some dead parrots in here. I need to change the history. Does anyone, how many, raise your hand if you recognize this graphic, in fact. That's what I thought. So this is a partridge family, kind of 1970s, so I think I lost some folks there. All right, so a classic example is, how many of you have ever heard of the flocking model or a schooling model? Okay, so when you look at a system like a flock of birds or a school of fish or a swarm of bats, traditionally, if you wanted to capture the dynamics of that flock, you'd have to write down a lot of messy equations to try to capture how that flock moves around together and maybe goes around an obstacle, but the flock is able to persist. Starting in the 80s, a guy named Craig Reynolds, who's kind of one of the leading computer graphics guys in Hollywood, looked at I believe by 90s he was looking at Batman Returns, but before that he was looking at a generic flock. And the story goes he was sitting in a cemetery watching some starlings at his lunch break, so you can get a sense of what he's like. And he kind of came up, we'll deal with that later. So he came, so imagine you're an animator in Hollywood and you have to animate 5,000 bats coming out of a cave. So one approach would be to puppet every little bat and make sure that if this bat turns, then this bat is affected by it, and basically hand puppet or hand animate the whole scene. The other approach is to come up with what are the simple rules of interaction of what we're going to call an agent. Anything that can make a decision in your system, we'll call an agent. And if there's just 3 simple rules, one, keep a minimum distance from your neighbors, and you can only see a few of your neighbors. You can't see the whole flock or the whole school. You have limited information. The second rule is, of the neighbors you can see, align with them. And the third rule is, of the neighbors you can see, move to the center of their mass. So you might see that the third rule is kind of an attractor, and the first rule is kind of a repeller. They're pushing each other away. So in a lot of the systems we look at, it has this attraction and repulsion kind of aspect. This kind of dynamic sets up a lot of potential for what we call self-organization or just complex behavior. And just one last bit is, usually in what we call agent-based modeling, it's a form of simulation, we really care about the interactions. We don't really care too much about what's going on inside the brain of the bird. And in fact, we should almost call it interaction-based modeling, because that's the important thing. So in one case, it might be a fish. In another case, it might be a bird. So we really care about the interactions. So let me run this forward for you. And you can download this off the web, too, by the way. This is called Cool School, spelled with a K and a W in there. So let me run this. So here we have, I'm sorry, I have a little bit of an allergy/cold here. So here we have 300 agents forming what kind of looks like a relatively good a school of fish. But let's go ahead and add 5,000 fish. And you can see that this algorithm scales up. All we have to do is add more fish, and they all have those same rules, and we get this schooling behavior. Now, if we add a fourth rule, like we're going to add some predator fish, coincidentally redfish. And these guys have a rule, just go find the closest bluefish. And the redfish now have this, if you see a redfish near you, the bluefish will say, avoid the redfish. And you see that this dynamic is very robust. It forms itself. It doesn't have a centralized controller in the way of like maybe modern corporations are run, or maybe not, in a sense where as soon as you got new information, like, oh, here's a threat, what should we do? And they all go into a conference room and come up with a strategic plan. Instead, everyone is acting on their own and processing their information on their own, and from that getting a dynamic, self-organizing system, which is a school of fish. And one of the labels we put on that is it's an emergent property. The idea of emergence is that this school of fish is not just a big fish. It has its own dynamics. And if you were to try to model this with a bunch of equations, it'd be very difficult to capture with just the equations alone. So So one nice thing about complexity as a programmer or as a researcher, it's actually usually very simple to write the code, and you let the computer have a whole bunch of iterations and replicating all those agents and having them interact. So as a researcher, it's kind of a nice shortcut. And I mean, you should learn your math, don't get me wrong, but you can kind of jumpstart a lot of your research by simulating a lot of systems, and you can get and wait for the math. This would be graduate level math that you'd have to do at the high level, but at the low level of simulation, it's relatively simple to write, maybe 15 lines of code.
What are the dark objects on the bottom?
Just a shadow, I think. Should be a shadow. Okay. So now I'm just going to introduce a little bit of the Santa Fe. Actually, let me see if I forgot to put in. Giving away a little where it's going to go. Sorry. Actually, I completely messed up here, but it's okay. We'll recover. I'm going to sneak a couple pages off of the supercomputing challenge. I missed some of these slides here. I want to talk about ants. So research at the Santa Fe Institute and in complexity in general take a lot of hints from nature. So when we're answering the question of what is complexity, I think there's two major questions. One is, how does the system we're looking at organize itself? And then this is much more of a theoretical question of why do systems organize? Why is there order in the universe? When you look around here, we have a lot of structure and organization. When in physics, there's this idea of the second law of thermodynamics, that everything should decay and go out to a randomness or a heat death in the universe. So when you study chemistry, things tend to get more and more dispersed. So why do we have this? Why do we have all this structure in our world? So this is kind of more of the theoretical why question. So in answering the how, we're going to look at ant food foraging. And this is if you ever have ants in your kitchen, you'll know that they're very tenacious. And you can start from a place with a nest and have an obstacle and a food source, and you can move the obstacles, and the ants tend to solve the problem. Here's a simulation of some ants. And here's a very sophisticated graphic. This is a log. You know it's a log because I said it's a log. And here's the nest and the food sources. So what's going to happen is we're going to start with, say, 800 or so ants and have them come out of the nest. And in the beginning, they're just randomly walking around. They have no idea where the food is. So they're just a bunch of random walkers. And if we were a physicist, we'd also say this is the same way that air molecules would come out in a random walk or an ideal gas would perform. But that's so watch these guys start to find the nest or find the food, and then start to form trails back to the nest. So if we, by chance picked this the bottom path, but if we were to run the simulation again, I don't know if the top path or the bottom path will win. Looks like the bottom path's going to win again. Let's run it again. Yep, looks like the top one here. So one clever term is called symmetry breaking. Both of these paths are symmetric or equal length to here, and both are equally likely, but when the system runs, it's going to choose one and break that symmetry. In the beginning, they're both equally likely, and then this becomes more and more probable. So you can save that for your complexity bingo card, symmetry breaking. We'll call that out later. So you got emergence, symmetry breaking, and self-organization so far. So the question is, how does this system work? Anyone have ideas? Have you heard of how ants find food, or some species of ants? Any? Mick? Pheromone trails.
Some pheromones say fleas this way, junkyards that way, foods this way, attack these guys.
Right. And what's a pheromone?
It's a chemical messenger that works not just within the body, but between.
Right.
In the case of an ant, that's all they really have to communicate by.
Right. In fact, the ants themselves in some tasks they do, with the antennae, but in a lot of cases they're just communicating with a chemical signal. And a new term is Stigmergy, or the ability to communicate indirectly, almost like with SMS text messaging. We're not that's a bad example. But the idea that you're not directly communicating with each other is called a stigmergic interaction, where it's mediated by the environment. So if we watch this thing again, let's actually turn on the pheromone field. And you can see these blue and green fields interacting. The blue field is when these ants leave the nest, they're randomly walking in the beginning, and they drop a blue pheromone. When they find food, they change their behavior and start dropping green pheromone. And when they're leaving the nest, they're following the green pheromone field. And when they're leaving the food source, they're following the blue pheromone field. So if we run this again and actually just hide the ants, you can see the interaction of these two fields. So it's really these chemical fields that are giving them the information. And this is forming what's called a gradient. Most of the ants went this way, and so if you imagine this in 3D, that would be like a big hill. And so it always gives information of how to get back to the nest. So there's like a big hill going that way and a big hill going that way. So watch that one more time. So if you had a bunch of ants on your counter, what's the best thing to do to get rid of them?
Get some pheromones.
I'm sorry?
Get some pheromones.
Get some pheromones. That's a good. Can you buy some? Is there?
Just spray it with oil.
The guys that are the engineers and some developers,
Yeah. It's a good idea. So one, I was thinking wipe the counter, but I like the pheromone idea.
This is WD-40. I used to do this in Peace Corps.
Uh-huh.
Spray WD-40 on the wall, and they'd have to go up and around it.
Kind of like this log here, yeah?
Yeah,
I see.
but it's knocking out the pheromone trail.
Excellent. And is WD-40 flammable?
It's kerosene.
Yeah.
Spray it on a wasp nest. Works the same way.
So by the way, this is a program, some people have mentioned NetLogo. Pretty much all the software I'll be showing you tonight is free and that you can download. Maybe 3/4 of them are open source also, so you can look at the code behind them in actually the code that runs the modeling environment. But at least most of them are free to download. If you Google NetLogo, basically you have all these panels. You have a display window like over here. And then here's kind of what the code looks like for that ant model. But I'm just kind of scrolling up and down, and some of those are just plotting and statistics, but I don't know if you can tell, but it's really not that much code. So they do a lot of heavy lifting for you to manage your agents. So if you want to make simulations like this, and arguably a lot of interesting games would start with having a lot of agents moving around as maybe your enemies, and this kind of pathfinding way is something you can use in your games as you're trying to find out maybe where your targets are. Maybe this is where some high value, you don't know where your opponent is, but you could be using this in kind of in the artificial intelligence part of your game, or the AI. This could be an approach you can use. And you can also make it more expensive as, say, you go over something that's maybe like a big hill, or if you go through mud, you can make these, make it more expensive in those patches. Any questions so far? Okay. So let me just say that as an, beyond metaphor, if I was to actually model lightning strikes, it would be almost identical to the ant model. If I had a charge here, a positive charge here, and a negative charge up in the clouds, and a plasma channel that's forming, it would be, as a programmer, it's relatively the same model. Now, there's different models of lightning, and there's different models of ants. So, but in this particular case, when I looked at a lightning model, it was exactly the same. So it's basically an electric discharge. And that's what we call looking for universality classes or universalities in models. That, again, we don't really care about the agents, we care about their interactions, and it starts to describe a lot of different phenomena across different disciplines. And that's actually kind of exciting in science and in industry in general, where you can get now and ask a plasma physicist to talk to an ant person, and maybe they've done something in plasma physics that can inform a biologist, and vice versa. And one quip we used to say is that sociologists were kind of having physics envy, trying to make their very hard discipline more rigorous with physics. But actually, physics is now becoming the sociology of particles. Particles are getting much more and more interactive in modern physics. So they're not as dumb as they used to be. So it's just kind of an interesting back and forth. All right, so this is the second question of why do systems organize? and I'll just kind of say it here. You've heard nature abhors a gradient, or I'm sorry, a vacuum. Kind of the addendum to that would be nature abhors a gradient. And by gradient, we just mean is anytime you have a conserved quantity of, say, energy or action in a, but imagine people walking around, think of that as action. Anytime there's a concentration of that and there's a gradient, nature will try to get rid of that gradient with structure. So an example of that would be a hurricane or tornado. So these structures form in the context of what we call a far from equilibrium condition, where at equilibrium everything is equally distributed. When it's far from equilibrium, say everything's in the corner of the room, nature, if we put all of the air molecules with its energy in the corner, nature would create a whole bunch of vortices or whirlpools to get rid of it. And the idea here is not just that, where do whirlpools come from or structure, but the idea is that these structures are actually faster at getting rid of those gradients than if there was no organization. So this is the classic tornado in a tube that maybe you saw in kindergarten. Nothing tricky, just a small hole here. Nothing up my sleeves. I do have a never mind, tattoo for my son. But so these are just two little plastic soda bottles. And the thing I've want you to notice is not that the tornado forms, but how fast it is. So if I try to find the best angle to get rid of the water without having structure, or going like this, you'll see this kind of dripping motion here, right? I guess I could even squeeze it to kind of get rid of it. But if I was to let that drain, it would maybe take 11 minutes. But if I had structure, like a tornado, it'll drain in about 11 seconds. So the idea is that structure gets rid of gradients. And if you took away nothing else from this talk, that's one way of looking at, so when you approach a complex system, one of the things to ask is, well, what's the gradient, and then what structure is arising to get rid of it? And then once you do that, what are the interaction of those particles that must be happening to let this thing form? Which is pretty amazing, because 10 to the 23rd water molecules are now coordinated and doing something together. So you can pass that around and spin it. So you can see this phenomenon in all kinds of events. Go home and take some cooking oil, and this comes from physics, a Rayleigh-Bédard cell, which is a convective cell. And basically, the gradient here is if you have a pan of oil, and you have some temperature here. In the beginning, actually, it's just warm, right? And the oil molecules are able to collide with each other and dissipate the gradient in a linear way. And it's kind of not interesting. But as the potential gets higher and higher, and there's a big enough gradient, you cross a critical threshold, and all of a sudden this whole pan of oil gets coordinated into these convective cells. And these things are now coordinated. Here they're not coordinated, and if I knew the position of one oil molecule, I'd have no information about this oil molecule over here. However, if I'm in this kind of structure, I have a lot of information. If I know this guy, I know where all these other guys are. So that's an example from physics. And now, let me return you to your regularly scheduled program. So this is, as Bob was mentioning, an advertisement for the Santa Fe complex. This is something that's on the, we're forming, and we formed in December. We're a workspace, very ad hoc, very dynamic. If you think of a lot of work these days, a lot of things are organized by projects, not by companies. As people come together on a project from many companies and then go back into the woodwork. Hollywood is organized this way for films. You see a film right around the corner where you have crews come together and they know each other and build up a social network, but then they go back into the woodwork once the film's done. So we think Santa Fe has a lot of potential for doing project work, and it needs a space for it, for doing simulation and visualization. Tentatively, we're seeking 3 major areas: applied complexity, urban planning and simulation, some of the stuff I'll show today, and then just pure computational arts. What can you do that's fun with computers or video? Kind of like what happens at Site Santa Fe, but here's a place that you can actually mess around with that kind of stuff, which I'll show in a second. There's a strong education mission there with formal classes, brown bags, scientific and technology lectures, kind of like tonight, and maybe future lectures will be there, Bob. And then internships on real-world projects. So we see this as maybe if you think of Warehouse 21, but this is Warehouse 42 or 63. A place where people can go and create their own kind of environment and create the next generation of this kind of stuff. So we invite everyone to come in there, or Warehouse 84 even. The space is fluid, again, let's see. So that's what it looks like here. That's a rendering in SketchUp. By the way, it's a free tool that you can do some modeling in. Here's Agua Fria, as Bob was mentioning. This is the rail yard here, so it's on the northwest corner. You notice this rail spur, and this is where they used to fix the rail cars at the turn of last century. And then it was the Santa Fe Co-op grocery store. So it's always had this community use. So we want a lot of just interesting people coming in and doing interesting projects or giving talks. And we have the idea of a curated talk or blender, which means someone picks a topic, maybe someone's interested in GIS and simulation, and organizes 4 or 5 people in the community that know something about it to give a talk. Here's some pictures of inside. These are about 4 months old. It's finished now. Here's some example classes going on there with College of Santa Fe, community college and high school credit classes in software architecture, intro to complex systems, computer game design. This would be more graduate level, but at the College of Santa Fe, they're starting up a graduate program. So there's a potential trajectory in Santa Fe to actually go ahead and get your PhD all the way through College of Santa Fe or UNM. So we're looking also at collaborations with UNM. And there's a lot of potential of doing some of your work here. Education collaborators. And so here's some potential projects going on here. And this is kind of a request that if you guys are interested in working on something, we constantly need interns and mentors. The only difference is interns, we think of you're working on our projects. Mentors, we're working on yours. So if you have a good project idea, we'll help you with the technology or the software. Or here you're kind of learning kind of what some of this is about. So this is looking at, right now there's a project looking at high school dropout, we're 40 to 60%. How can we visualize that and look at alternatives? Looking at affordable housing. There's this idea of the digital history project as you get artifacts into the computer and fly through a virtual Santa Fe. Music visualization, adaptive housing. So you can read the rest, but project guts, projects, and supercomputing. All right, now on to example computer games. And just, where are we, at 7? I don't have my clock. Huh? 5 after? 5 of, okay. So one of the obvious applications of agent-based modeling or simulation, we worked on with some students here about 5 years ago when Police Chief Beverly Lennon and David Sperling were here. Actually, it started off as a cruising model around the plaza with the students, and then it kind of morphed into a Zozobra project, and Mike was doing a lot of interviewing on that and thinking about these large public events where you have 20 to 30,000 people on at Fort Marcy in Majors Field, and it's kind of like an indoor venue. How many of you have been to Zozobra? Yeah. How many of you have not heard of Zozobra? Okay. So this is a picture of a simulation of it. But so Zozobra usually sits up here. Here's the park. Completely the wrong trees. I apologize. And it's never this green. But there is this arroyo here with these bridges. And so the fire chief said this is kind of like an indoor venue, even though it's outside. So we're really concerned about all the exits and the idea that on this project, let me bring it up here. So this is a program called Maya, which is a 3D modeling and rendering program. And this is just the movie that came out of it, the QuickTime. Let me play this. So this is Majors Field in Fort Marcy. Here's the arroyo again. And it's a little choppy, but you get the idea. So the idea is how can we take tools from Hollywood that they use for videos and games and start to make simulations with it. So this was the flyover, and then this was a NetLogo model earlier on in the project, which I was showing you again, which is a free tool. And putting 25,000 people in here. This is Majors Field. This is the baseball area. And one of the interesting things, and again, this was one of these large stakeholder meetings where you had the Kiwanis group, the police department, the fire department, the local security department, all had their own kind of interests. The Kiwanis, for instance, wanted everyone to enter from Washington Street. Makes ticketing easier. But the research in crowd dynamics is under stress. People tend to go out where they know. If they haven't come in from another entrance, maybe putting ticketing over here and over along Old Taos Highway, that we're looking north here. That has a lot of value. So this is a simulation of the crowds at Zobra. And one of the advantages of this kind of approach, agent-based modeling, is that you can have what we say are heterogeneous agents, meaning every agent doesn't have to be the same. You can have one person that has like 3 kids with them, and if they get separated, that person now has the behavior to keep those 3 kids together. In contrast to other simulation technologies where you might treat this whole thing as a fluid, or even in physics as a granular physics where it's like sand coming down through here.
So does each color represent a different agent?
Yes, it does, but it doesn't have meaning beyond that. It's just to distinguish them. But, they could.
Steve, could I say something quick about that?
Yes.
One of the interesting things, that the reason I was working with Steve on this is that you've got a lot of different points of view on the event that we don't know about. And so the social research was done at the front end to basically listen and learn the different frames of reference that people have different groups, Fox, Guerin, Kiwanis Club, and so on and so forth. And then we would take that as a resource to get some ideas about what kind of rules to put agents if we were in fact going to have a concentrated model as well. So one of the things that Breakfish emphasizes that we go with them sometimes is sort of bottom-up model. Investigate and understand the points of view in the world first, and then think about how to represent that model. That makes the first part very good. Second thing Steve said that I want to underline too is that it's almost like family therapy, because you had these groups who have been sometimes in conflict with each other in terms of how to manage the event or how to change it. And in this case, once they all sat in the room with this as the common anchor, the whole thing started to flow. So it was really, really spectacular what started happening. A major contribution of the noise.
Yep.
Do you do an element of crowd control of, as you said, if there was an incident that had to get people out as opposed to getting in?
Right.
Whether there was, gang violence for
Right, and even something as trivial as a smoke bomb out in left field is enough to, cause a problem. Not that I don't want to give you guys any ideas, just. I had one other comment on there. I'll come back to it, I guess. Yeah, moving forward. So that kind of turned into, if that was the minor leagues, here's the major leagues of a baseball stadium. We were contacted by Homeland Security Institute, which is a kind of a partner of Homeland Security, looking at evacuation from the All-Star game at Pittsburgh Park, PNC Stadium, which is the nicest stadium in the country and the worst baseball team. Bob used to go to games there, right? In your CMU days, did you go to maybe the old stadium? But so this is so if you imagine flocks but constrained in networks. So before we talked about birds moving generically around or in zozobra, but now they're going to be constrained to these networks or graphs where you have these aisles and what we'll call aisles and corridors and rows where people sit. So this is from the air PNC Park here. And they wouldn't tell us directly what it was, but we Googled. They said it was this National Planning Scenario 12, and we didn't have clearance, but there's like 3,000 hits on Google. So it's, and I'll tell you that there's multiple suicide bombers in the park. This bridge is closed to, it's open for pedestrians during game day, and then there's a subway over in here. So it was basically suicide bombers in the park, then they hit a disguised emergency vehicle comes in, that blows up, then people run over to the subway, and that blows up, and then people go to an emergency room, and then that blows up. So it's a feel-good project. But the question is, as a complex system, as a city, how do you respond to some big event like that? All of your public safety workers, your police, your fire, your hospitals, how would you start to do triage and react? So Homeland Security has like these 15 national planning scenarios, and it's very light reading if you have some time. So this is what the bridges look like with the pedestrians. And then, as I was mentioning, here's the logical layer of where people will be walking. You have, say, 17 exits. And then the question is, as software programmers, imagine like we have the ants moving through here, and it's exactly like the ants in the sense that every time step, when this guy's moving, and maybe he's going over here, I don't want to have to calculate, how do I get through the stadium to go where I want to go? So we use pheromones again, where we flood the whole stadium with pheromones, digital pheromones, that when they come up to an intersection, they can look on that network and say, should I go left or right? And some agents will have maybe know really strongly want to go to one place. Another agent may say, just get me out of here. And as the things get worse and worse, it's just get me out of here to the closest one. Or they can just start following the crowd and not try to navigate. So when we open up a program here, this is, I'm sitting here in Blender. This is an open source tool. If it just take you to Blender here, blender3d.org. So you can download this. So before when I showed you that flyover of Fort Marcy Park, that was done with a tool called Maya, which might be $2,000 or $5,000 depending on what options you get. But here's in my opinion, just as good of a tool for free, and it's open source, so you can modify the code, and it has a game engine in it, and it's scriptable in Python, which is a very user-friendly kind of language. So here we are playing in it. Here's the stadium. Here's the code. And this is really just to take our network and put it out to another tool, which I'll show you in a second. But that's what Python looks like. Hopefully it's relatively readable. So here's the logical layer. And I mentioned before, here's some exits. Let me move into edit mode. And I'll select all my exits. In fact, I'll just start with one here. And here's, again, how that flood fill happens, or the pheromone field. So we start at one exit, and we march along and go ask that guy, hey, who are your friends, who are your neighbors on this network? And then we would store at this location, well, I am this length away from an exit. This guy is 0 away from an exit. Then we go to the next guy, and he's that plus that away from an exit. And we continue that on and so on until the network floods. Or we can come in and do that for all of them simultaneously. And this would just be, just get out anywhere. And so you can kind of see how that would kind of be informed of where the farthest place for all exits are. So this is the logical layer. Now the game layer is, if we come in here, we can look at the actual model that we're using. So this is more for visual fidelity than it is for the logical, or the agents really don't know anything about this. They're walking on that other layer. But this is from the game world for like Major League Baseball game. This stuff was available that we could use for the visual side, and the agents were going somewhere else. This is what it looks like when we actually put that up on the network. So I'll run this locally. And this code is all open source. You can download it off of redfish.com/stadium. And it was actually kind of interesting that Homeland Security would allow this to be, to let us put that into the contract. I think we kind of snuck it in there. I mean, our main contact kind of was very supportive, but I don't think people, anyway, so this is all open source and up there, so you can download the code and see how this actual model works. So this is a tool called processing. And if you go to processing.org, this is actually where the model's running. And this is 50,000 agents running in real time. And now we can start to drop simulated bombs here. And then we're looking at things like how many people were injured in the bomb and then how many are injured in the actual exit. Let me start that again. So you can kind of come up with your own bombing scenario and compete with your friends.
So Stephen, there have been real life stampedes and soccer games in Europe, for example.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
know enough about those events that you could actually try to see whether you predict what actually happened, or is there not enough information to do?
Yeah, so I think I have those. Let me just see crowd. One of the researchers at Santa Fe Institute is Dirk Helbing. He studies crowds a lot. It's actually good to bring up the video. Let's see. Because I think it's informative of. Oops. So one of the most critical things, kind of like in physics, there's kind of a threshold that'll happen. So you can watch these crowds as they're kind of going. Some of these are in Guatemala City, a football match in Manchester, or Sheffield, UK, a Who concert, and actually during the Hajj, which is actually one of the biggest crowd events, over 1 million people, all needing to circle around in Mecca. So this is Hajj. So one thing is, so we're looking at, how can we start to, from that start to simulate and have friction on your agents. So one of the things, there's a critical, and it depends on culture, so about 4 people per square meter, things start to really slow down and get sticky. The physics change, versus like being a fluid, they become more like a solid. In different cultures, in Asia, for instance, depending on the event, it might be as high as 8 people per square meter. So it's both size and just personal space. Some counterintuitive things is sometimes putting an obstacle in front of the entrance makes the flows faster. So it's almost like if you think of a funnel with sand on it, can get packed up, but if there's a little obstacle down the bottom, it allows the flows to happen, what we call laminar flow, where things don't get jammed up. So this is just kind of what it looks down at the particle level. But I want you to come away with these are when you take it from an agent-based modeling approach, it's very easy to start. Each agent is just kind of looking around and saying, do I know where the exit is? Go toward it and avoid my neighbors, right? Okay. And so this is how you would simulate something like that. The rows, the aisles, and the corridors, roughly 5.5 meters wide at the corridor level. Then the last bit in this kind of section is combining GIS. In the past, I showed you using agent-based models on 3D models, and now we're using agent-based models on GIS models. So a place like the city of Venice in northern Italy is, we call it the fish. And except for over here, it's all boats. All these little streets are actually just canals. There's no, and where there are streets are just walking byways. This is the Grand Canal through here. It's actually quite fantastic. So the city, and I'll show you in a second, the city of Santa Fe has this kind of data too. So for every building in Santa Fe, we have the footprint of that building plus how high that building is. So from that, we're able to extrude it in Blender and say, okay, well, here's the city we're looking at. And now we're going to be starting to look at, well, this is something Sean worked on. When we started now making it more like a game where we have the actual boats. They have maybe 6 major types of boats. This is their public bus called the Vaporetti, a garbage boat, an ambulance, and then this thing is a little ferry called a traghetti that goes kind of back and forth. But they also have gondolas, very similar. And then other kinds of motorcraft that are like this. So this is, the challenge here was they had observational data, and this is kind of getting into data visualization and using agent-based modeling, not to make a model of how people move, but actually just to visualize the data that they do have. And we're finding that more and more, what we're doing more and more of, is helping just people get a sense of their own data and not making the model first. In the past, we'd make the model, then the visualization. Now we're making the visualization first, and then the modeling would come from what-if kind of questions. What are we going to change? So this is a case where they would have people watching every day, or on a given day, every boat that passes by, and which canal they came, for instance here, which canal they came in on and which canal they left on. And from that, we inferred the traffic for a given day. And now they're interested in bringing it to a table like this, much more refined, more probably a bottom projection table, where people can come around and start to manage the traffic. Again, it's multiple stakeholders like the Zobra project, but in this case, it's the city managers themselves that want to reduce wave traffic and noise. You have the taxi drivers that want to maximize revenue, but while minimizing cost of their routes. And then you have the cargo operators that want to maximize how many deliveries they can make, and again, minimize cost. So they also want to maximize their speed. So questions are, which canals should we make open or closed? I just got to, let's see if there's a Venice here. So you guys are probably, this is coming in from Microsoft Live. It's rare that I say, oh, here's a cool product from Microsoft, but here's one instance. So this is Venice here, and we come into a bird's eye view. So that's pretty cool. So we're using this kind of stuff to now texture the buildings. What's nice about Microsoft Live is you're able to look at, here I'm looking towards the north, but I can also take a similar view. What's that look like looking from the south or looking from the west? So they got 4 views that can be used as textures on your 3D models. Okay. So here's the Grand Canal, and here you can see some of the vaporetti that I was talking about, the public buses. And these are the bus stops here. Is there a question? No? All right, let's come back here. I'm running something that I shouldn't, it's really slow. All right. Okay, and this will be the last one of an example project, and then we'll move over to here. So this is more on, we think there's a demand, if you're interested in visualizing a lot of data or processes in organizations, and you mentioned scheduling before, or queuing theory. This is Eli Lilly. We did a project for them looking at the manufacturing of drugs, and in particular, the R&D component. So they have 3 major portfolios: the R&D component, the manufacturing, and the sales and marketing. But here it's you have this challenge that you have all these drugs to look at that might be useful, and there's some upfront cost over time that you're going to incur, and then revenue over time. So most projects look like this, not only for Eli Lilly, but any project in most organizations have this upfront sunk costs. But when you have a whole bunch of these, which I'll show here in a different view, Lilly, here it is. So here's the scheduling data. And this is probably the most industry-specific or semi, you don't see people moving around. It's more abstract. But it is, you can get a sense of the need for visualization and game-like tools to manage these. So here's, in business, they have this idea of what's called a Gantt chart, which is basically here's all your projects over here and all the work that it takes to get that project done. And roughly colored from green, they have to manufacture the drug. Red is, does it work or not? Blue is, yellow is it safe to some degree? And then blue is, how am I going to deliver it? Will it be an injectable or a patch or a pill? And then these gray bits are the clinical research trials, where they get more safety testing. And then back here is the revenue that you're starting to recognize, kind of like that curve I was showing you before. So here's, you start to market it, and then you have some patent expiration, and this is coming from the marketing people. So again, time going out 10 years, the different drugs under development, and then the human resources needed to do the research. And if we start to look at this, underneath each one of these modules are the costs involved, the sunk costs, if you will. And then if we integrate the portfolio on the back wall, you're seeing here's the total cost for the portfolio and the back. And then here's human resources and bottlenecks in the manufacturing or research. Basically, you're trading dollars for information that I want to have some, I have to be over some threshold at certain stage gates that I can actually approve this drug and move it on to manufacturing. And for them, 15-to-1 failure rates are very normal and good. That they know they're researching, but the trick is to fail early and fail cheaply on these guys, and so you can get through a lot of possible drugs to look at. So, with the explosion of genomics and proteomics, how many drugs you have to look at they needed to get some kind of way of managing that. And then one of the techniques that came out of Santa Fe Institute in complexity was the kind of scheduler that is used. This is a genetic algorithm where you basically breed a whole bunch of schedules that might satisfy the resources and maximize your profit. And you let those compete, and you take the good ones and you marry those with the other good ones, and you keep on evolving a schedule. So this is an application, again, abstract in an industry, but you can kind of see. The takeaway, I think, is that spreadsheets are running companies now and databases. 10 years from now, I think it's going to be a lot more visualization, simulation, modeling, and as the younger generation's growing up, they're going to demand more interactive kind of ways of dealing with the information. So if you have an idea, so there's a lot of opportunity in this kind of applying games and visualization. Okay, so this is the last one. Let's throw off the computers. So I've been holding this thing here. Let's see if that lights. So when we worked on a wildfire evacuation project for the fire department here, we noticed them working around tables in human simulations, but they didn't have any computers involved. And we were very intrigued by getting away from, again, having everyone, when you watch a presentation, you tend to sit back, right, like in a movie. When you're around a table or playing a game, you tend to lean forward. And that kind of interaction is what we were after, and I'll kind of show that in a second. But here is the evacuation of Santa Fe. We're starting off with that same flood filling algorithm like we were using in the stadium. So this is just bootstrapping the model. We tend to reuse a lot of our ideas. We don't have many ideas, so we just reuse them. So basically, again, it's instead of people moving on a network of a stadium, it's cars on a graph. And I-25, obviously, is Cerrillos, 599. And it's the first minute of a fire. So we have two complex systems, the traffic model and the wildfire. And the wildfire, right now, it has a really strong wind component coming out of the southwest at 40 miles per hour, 10% relative humidity, and like 90 degrees temperature. So this fire will start spotting up in here. This is Upper Canyon, Cerro Gordo, kind of where the water tank is at the corner of Alameda and so here you go. You're seeing that spotting behavior. You'll start to see people starting to back up. So there was two major uses for this. One was letting people know in their town, in a neighborhood, here's some potential scenarios you could be looking at and why it's important to start to prepare your home for evacuation. In the event that you can't evacuate, that you might have to shelter in it. Santa Fe has a particular kind of architecture that is better than, say, Los Alamos for withstanding a crown fire that might pass in 2 to 3 minutes. And these types of houses, if you don't have a shake shingle roof, which aren't in the city, some in the county, you can withstand a direct flame for, say, 30 minutes. in theory. So most of the, kind of just like the stadium, most of the deaths happen during the evacuation. So if it's kind of getting people ready to evacuate early or get ready to shelter in place. And if you're going to shelter in place, the importance of getting your house ready and being mentally ready to, and it might not be your house, it might be your neighbor's house. So look around your neighborhood and think about which is the best house. And be nice to your neighbors. So this is what we saw when we went to one of these simulations. Again, they had no computers, but they had this kind of, here's Hyde Park Road and 1st and 2nd Street and Main Street in Santa Fe, which we don't have a 1st, 2nd, Main Street, but that's what the model was. And then here was some yarn around a tree. And the real value of this was not to give answers out of a model. And we're learning a lot of this. It's really, you're putting a junior guy, this guy was put in the hot seat, so to speak, to be incident commander with all of his senior people around him, and he's working for the county. Here's the city fire guys, he's a state fire. And these guys typically don't work together, but they have to come together on a wildfire. And how do we work as a team? So the idea is you put this guy in the hot seat and say, hey, you got maybe a 3-acre, the beginning of a brush fire. You arrive on scene. Jimmy's missing with his dog. They can't find him. You've got no water, and in 2,000 gallons within 20 minutes. What's your next step? That's kind of a training application. So if you actually watch this, you probably won't be able to hear too much, but that's all right. Yeah, that's all right. But basically, you're hitting a bunch of radio traffic going back and forth, like 6:02 on scene, 30 minutes ETA. So it's all, I was surprised that it wasn't a lot of strategy and chin kind of rubbing. So you can say, La Cienega, tanker 2, where do you want me? And that would be, in wildfire, that's the guy that flies the airplanes and also does air traffic control. And he's the pilot. You'll see a couple of hot shots that actually jump out of the plane, Sheriff Solano. And in this particular simulation, they said, order the evacuation. Solano said, I ordered the evacuation, everything's clear. So that's kind of they were more interested about how do you fight the fire in this simulation. But you can imagine now having a much more live board with agent-based modeling and visualization kind of supplementing this process. And they even have reports out to the media practicing that so they can give information and a lot of uncertainty of what's going on and ordering evacuations. So this is an existing sand table, another one. And when we saw this interface, we thought, man, that's really old school, but then we saw how fast they could move things around, make a mountain, say there's a suburb over here, the wind's coming out of the southwest, let's make a road here, and some drip torch lines here. And they can make a scenario very quickly compared to having a computer jock sitting there trying to, I'll get back to you in 2 days after I model it. So this is kind of the existing scenario. Here's where we want to go, where here's the overlay. Here's what it looks like when you project on we get the elevation data for Santa Fe from the USGS. Here's Sun and Moon Mountain, Atalaya, Thompson Peak, and then color it based on elevation and aspect or the direction the sun's shining. And we put it in a $14 enchilada pan. And so the idea is that you can project on a lot of different surfaces and make them, what we'll show you in a second, how you can make these surfaces now interactive. And what we're looking at here with the water is we didn't know where the water was. We just dropped 10,000 agents randomly and let them fall downhill, and they find the water, or the waterways. So here's Santa Fe River, Arroyo Chimisa, Arroyo Honda, you can see a little bit of. Interestingly, this is Cerro Gordo. So Gonzales would be normally a lot of water runoff. Santa Fe Institute's up in here. So there's research now into what if we took a sand table and how can we infer the height of the sand as people move it around so the computer knows how high things are. There's and we want to get this down to $50 so that a rural fire department can afford it. So basically, you shine lights from 2 different sources and infer the topography from that information. So you have one webcam watching, interestingly, in the infrared, so that you can project anything you want on here and not get distracted. Your computer won't get confused by what you're projecting in the visible. So in the infrared, you're projecting with 2 light sources. You can hack a webcam by taking out the infrared filter and then put some color exposed negative over the front of the lens, and now you have an infrared camera for $20 these days. But it turns out even the Wii controller, which is up on the, is it up there, Sean? Oh yeah, it's way up there. Well, I'll show in a second. So we're still working on the algorithms. Simon Mahalik is here. He's working with, hey Simon. Simon's working with 2 mentor students or intern students out of Santa Fe Prep, and working at trying to get what we call the photometric stereo bit working. And then there's 3 students out of Monte del Sol. This is what it looks like at the complex. When you actually, a larger table, we were going to bring it here, but I got the wrong kind of sand that's very dusty. I think they, it wouldn't have been so good here. But you can kind of see this is all projection down, so it's just normal play sand. And then you can see, right now these guys are crafting Ski Santa Fe and putting up, in Net Logo, they'll be putting up the lifts and then having people ski down. And then how do you optimize as a ski area mogul? It would be a game, or Tycoon, one of the Tycoon games, of where do you clear the brush. And this is a contour view of it. So this is Joey and Matt of Monte del Sol. Anyone know them? Yeah. And also Dominic's on this project, but he's not here that day. So you can, it's all open source. And I just want to encourage, let's explore all kinds of different ways of interacting in the real world with computer models. So it's, you can take this technology and create something else with it. For instance, maybe this would be, maybe this would be in an artistic way, a computational art exhibit. This might be your frequency on a music visualization. This might be frequency and amplitude. And as you move the sand, you'd get a sound generator, for instance. So what can you do with something like this? As you move the sand and the computer knows what you're doing, what can you do with it? That's a kind of a challenge. So again, here's some of the example projects. And the end of this bit. And thank you for Sean for setting up. And now we'll talk about moving out of the computer and onto here. And Sean? So 2 ways of doing that we've been messing with. In the first case, I'm not going to take down the Wii controller, but everyone knows the Nintendo Wii. I find it interesting. It's in huge demand right now. It's where you hold this wand, and you're able to interact with your computer. And it has terrible graphics compared to PlayStation or Xbox. But people are very intrigued with being able not to have to use a joystick. You can use this wand. And by moving it, say you're doing a golf swing or a tennis shot, it can sense your movement. It has 3 accelerometers in the wand. Interestingly, it has an infrared webcam. And when I keep pointing up here, I apologize, but it's kind of that thing with a strap on the bottom of that white thing. And so we're hacking that. And you can go to, maybe you've seen, we got this off the web, a YouTube video, johnnylee.net, if you're interested in this. And there's also WeHacks.org, I believe. But people that take the Wii remote and do non-conventional things with them. So, for instance, what are we going to run first here? Are you going to send to mine? You need my IP address.
Run the Wii first?
Yeah, let's run the Wii. So actually, folks can come up here. It might be, and gather around the table. So let me close this down. Let's see if this will start. All right, I need to sync it. Sorry. All right. Yeah, my Bluetooth. So what's kind of cool about this Wii controller is it has Bluetooth on it, so I can connect to this wirelessly. I'll go ahead and connect to it. And we're now connected. And I'm going to start this thing called Wii Remote. And then I'm going to start up another program. Here. So while it's loading that, we'll go ahead and calibrate it. So this thing's looking in the infrared, and I have an infrared LED, which is just a normal keychain, or I could be using fire. Fire. So actually, I'll try to sync it here. So it saw that point. So what we're doing is calibrating the screen. So whatever the Wii sees, it's able to lay it out on based on how it is here. Let's calibrate that again. Calibrate this point, and then this point. Okay, so now we have a mouse. So the Wii is actually taking all the positions and setting it to our computer. So let's start this guy up. So here's a model of Santa Fe, again a net logo, so let's just make this big here. Who can orient themselves and, let's see, let me, so now what we'll do is we'll start, make this interactive here. And so now if we were to take this and start a fire, say, so again, here's Sun and Moon Mountain, Atalaya, starting to get up around Thompson's Peak back here, the river basin. Let's see if this will start a fire.
Oh, that's cool.
That is sick.
So imagine now there's a scenario with the traffic, and now it's like, well, where would you do your drip torch if you wanted to stop that fire and actually change the wind? So again, it's how do we move computers out of the, and also things like a wind vector. Again, here's our wind. It's all pointing to the coming out of the west, but let's point it out of the southwest, or actually coming out of the northeast. So we can change our wind vector on the fly. So what we were seeing on those guys using on the table, now you have a simulation that's kind of more active. And again, you can put the traffic on it or something like that.
That's insane. That's awesome. One problem though, doesn't fire move uphill because it appears to be moving down?
This is high. Yeah, good point. So this is low to high. So these are the mountains on the east. In fact, even the wind's coming to the south, coming out of the northeast. So it's even going against the wind. Where
Theoretically, if you were to, let's say, start another fire up here to stop this one, or at least slow it, like.
right, and that's kind of the training that they're doing. Are you old enough to use a lighter?
Yes.
I never use it before, but it's okay.
Give me the letter, give me the letter, give me the letter, give me the letter, give me the letter. I'm cooler. Teach me how to use letter.
Let me show you. Even the sixth grader knows how. Smoke cigarettes. That's really good.
So this is all just coming out of the Wii Remote for $40. You know, you can buy the Wii Remote on Amazon, and then it talks to your Bluetooth.
What computers have Bluetooth?
You know the Wii, Nintendo Wii?
The game console.
Like, we've come to play, you know, those commercials.
Those are
I guess you don't like Santa Fe.
So we're looking at different views here now, so Here, so here's like a contour map.
Oh, this butane just smells beautiful.
I don't like that lighter. You can have this one.
Yeah.
No, mine.
I want this lighter.
Currently not.
I'm just even thinking about,
Let me just.
you know how I teach application software? How different seeing it down here is a change.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
even
exactly. You
even
talk to Mike.
Even teaching Excel by looking,
Yeah.
having a
Oops.
class look down at it.
Sorry.
What a different perspective.
And actually, there's I think a lot of research on to be done.
And this
on
is a
what's,
whiteboard?
well, it's just a piece of board. It could be anything.
Those whiteboard things. That's really cool.
Can I have the,
Yeah.
The mini light.
I figure I won't have to compete for that.
Let me see if this is going here.
But everything's better with fire.
Fire makes everything better. That's the expression.
Oh, Max.
So it's hard to feel if it's pushing or not, but that's your thumb. And you want to make sure you can see it. There you go.
Even just a spark starts.
You can't start a fire up there.
We need to
You can't go wrong with kids and fire.
on the social problems in the country.
Is this flammable, Patrick?
Oh, no.
No.
I mean, not after a few seconds,
It's not lighting. Oh, there we go.
It's a shot I wanted. You come around the ladder here. Let her through, Steven. It's very nice.
So if we want to show it, you have to get on the network, and then I'm 10.0.1.5 or whatever.
Can remind me. Which one? Theoretically.
Max?
You're dot 10?
Okay, theoretically,
doesn't matter what I am.
burned up all the Santa Fe.
192.1.
Yeah. Yeah, let him do that for. Yeah, we'll show you. We'll show you just one more thing here. I'm sorry.
Never give middle schoolers and elementary schoolers the power to learn
So the other thing is, there's also a thing called Reactivision. If you Google Reactivision or Reactable, and maybe you see these what are called fiducials, but these are really easy for the computer to recognize. So so these can become both the position and the location. We're going to try to get that running here in a second. Let me stop this. All right. Maybe not.
Bad. I'm trying to light Santa Fe.
I can't even get it to light.
So this is like, God.
Oh,
sick!
Yeah, you're changing the. So yeah, it's a normal interface now. Yeah, so you can run your interface with fire.
I have a quick question for you on the resolution you're getting with the $20 webcams.
So it's 1024 by 768 at 120 frames per second, and it's also automatically doing. It's finding the first 4 blobs, and sending them at 120 hertz to here.
Right on it with this.
Okay, and that's with your Wii?
Yeah, the Wii remote. Yeah.
All right, how about the 3D scanners you're talking about in case somebody shifted the sand and remodeled?
Well, just the frame rate, because it's a very easy thing to calculate. So it's 60 frames a second.
For a project I'm working on, I'm thinking about doing the exact same thing right now, but what I'm attempting to do is map changing facial expressions.
Right,
Think I need to
exactly.
up my resolution for
Yep.
that, or is that going to do it?
Just as whatever webcam, whatever the resolution of your camera is. The algorithm scales pretty nicely because it's just working on reflectance, not neighbors. So each pixel. So it scales. Let me try this other thing real quick here. Sorry.
Sure, he's got other cool things on here.
Let's stop that, and
You're
then.
gonna try starting a program with fire.
Let's see.
Wii remote.
pick up the infrared. What was it you were using the webcam for?
I'm sorry?
What was it you were using the webcam
For detecting the height of this, the shape of the sand. So let's just try this thing here. So I need to find out what my IP is, because basically what Sean is doing on his Mac is watching with this camera, and Sean, you might want to turn your camera around. All right, okay. I'm at 10.0.1.5. Yeah. Now, I'm also on a network. You have to make sure you're on this RTK network, or RYG. Actually, just run it locally with processing and show that you can, do you have, move your pieces. That'll be enough.
Well, we'll see.
Oh, you're on RYG? Yeah, okay, cool.
I'm gonna try starting up some programs. You're like.
Okay.
Camera.
Okay, this is a second application, and we're using processing, which is again a free tool. You can download at processing.org. That as we start to, let's see, it'll take a second, but Sean's machine is watching with that infrared webcam up there and looking for these shapes. Yeah, you can put that on there. And eventually, if it's each of these have a unique ID, and if it's an odd number, it'll be an attractor. It'll attract particles, and if it's an even number, it'll be generating particles. So here, so make sure that it can see your, so right now we don't have it registered.
It burned your hand. It likes mine.
Yeah, so the register, I think it's upside down actually, the camera. But we have to, there's basically a calibration, but you get the idea that it's kind of seeing these shapes and then generating some agents, like a fire or maybe these are, you're doing a physics example. These are charges.
So can it recognize the shapes like no matter what orientation?
Yeah, it can do rotation too. It gives you the rotation.
I got
It likes your phone.
All you gotta do is twist them. Get them to turn.
So that's your hacked webcam?
This is actually a really good infrared camera for maybe it's 400